I'm in the Department of Anthropology, and my work follows people who are planting genetically modified cotton seeds in South India. One of the key questions that we ask in the field of anthropology is, how do people use new technology? How do people use anything, integrate new anything into their lives? And being students of social theory, more often than not, when we look at the spread of a new tool, we find that its success or its failure has less to do with some objective cost-benefit analysis that people do, and a lot more to do with how people navigate their social life, be it through certain institutions or through the local social hierarchies that we all live with in everyday life. One classic example of a great technology that never panned out is the keyboards that we all use. We all use an extremely inefficient keyboard, the QWERTY keyboard, that some of us have probably used today, designed in fact to slow early typists down. The Dvorak keyboard, a far superior piece of technology, never panned out, in part because it was defeated by typing institutions like typing clubs and factories that just didn't feel like changing over their materials. When we look at agriculture, we want to keep in mind this same aspect of social diffusion and social knowledge. I studied the frontiers of sustainable agriculture in India, asking how farmers in the country with the world's largest population of small farms, in a country where they grow more cotton than anywhere else in the world, and yet have some of the lowest yields, how do farmers make decisions about what seeds they're planting, especially with something as new and interesting as genetically modified seeds? As we can see in this graph, Indian farmers rapidly adopted genetically modified seeds. More than 90% of everyone who was planting cotton in India by 2013 was planting genetically modified cotton. But while GM seeds themselves are a relatively settled issue, the question of which particular seed to plant is a lot more complicated. You can see on this graph, in some cases, as much as 65% of anyone who was planting cotton was planting one particular seed brand, the green brand in this case, and then abandoning that within 2 years completely. Why switch your seeds? And why do so rapidly? Seeds are not like Coke and Pepsi. These aren't the same kinds of commodities that we think about in business cycles. One answer is economic. Maybe some of these seeds are simply better. But that's not what the data says. If we look at those really spiky seeds, the ones that everyone seems to be planting year after year, the actual yield advantages of these seeds are completely lost in the economic wash, especially if you are a farmer who is not keeping detailed agronomic data year to year about what you're doing and everyone else is doing. All of this data gets really noisy really quickly. So we want a more complicated social explanation. Ethnographically, talking to people, which is a lot of what my job entails, we know that farmers copy each other. And they're looking very carefully to their neighbors to see what the results are of each different seed. This is a pretty typical field, and you can see how one farmer is comparing his own seeds to that of his neighbors. Which seed looks better to you? But on the village level, this is a spatial question, and it's one that we can ask with GIS. There are a couple of different ways that we can ask this question. To what extent are farmers copying each other in a given year? To what extent are they copying the choices of their neighbors in following years? To what extent are they staying the same? These are related to yields. These are related to what people are doing inside the village. If we cluster these in a GIS, taking points for each farm field and then associating that location with something like yield data, we can ask the question, okay, is there anyone whose yields are consistently better than that of those around them? This is a Moran's eye, which is a measure of how similar local things are to each other. So the red dot, meaning that someone is far and away a better yielder than the people around him. And a dark blue dot, meaning that someone is far and away a worse farmer than those around him. No pattern. Is anyone consistently planting these really popular seeds? That is to say, are seeds of the same value and we can assign them some value? Are those numbers close to each other? Is anyone consistently ahead of the curve on these seeds that get the spiky, really popular value? Again, no consistent pattern. In fact, if we cycle through cotton seed choices beginning in 2004, keep your eye on any given dot. There's no real consistent group of people who seem to be ahead of the game, who seem to know what they're doing. The actual pattern of seed choices through time, through space, reveals these shifting centers of social emulation. Your choices as your own farmer, as your own person making the decisions in your household have relatively little impact on what you're going to be doing in the following year. But your choices seem to have quite an important impact on the choices of those around you. So what we get are these shifting centers of knowledge, shifting centers of what to do. Your neighbors are a better predictor of choice than you are. Interesting situation for business, very difficult situation for anything that we might want to call sustainable agriculture. How to quantify that influence is something that turns out to be very, very, very complicated. It's an easy story to tell with words and qualifications in ethnography. Relatively difficult thus far to tell this story in math. But we're working on that, and I'd love to hear anyone's opinion on this moving forward. So please come talk to me at the end.